Hello and welcome back to Side 2 and over to John for some more news. John?
The George Public House in Enfield Town is set to fight a proposed compulsory purchase order that was first considered by the council 20 years ago. But before you start reaching for your telephone to protest the Civic Centre, let me hasten to tell you that it only applies to the pub's sole access road. So the pub itself, that's all right. The access road will be needed to create new delivery areas servicing shops and offices fronting London Road, the next stage of the developing Enfield Town Centre, which includes the second half of the Palace Gardens shopping precinct. The land was originally required under the Palace Gardens Sydney Road compulsory purchase order of 1969, which expired before any agreement with Brewers Charrington and Co. was reached. A Charrington spokesman said, "This has been a bone of contention again since last October, and we are still negotiating. This is our only access road to the pub, and we would want an alternative route provided."
The Lord Chancellor paid a visit to Edmonton County Court last week, one of the busiest courts in London. Lord Mackay travelled from Westminster to inspect the improved buildings at 4 Street, which handles such topics as divorce, custodial proceedings, debt claims, and traffic offences. The Law Lord met the judiciary, bailiffs, and clerical staff and looked into the on-the-ground mechanics of running a busy court schedule. Deputy Clerk Simon Smith said, "It was a fact-finding tour to meet staff who work there and get a feel of the conditions they work under."
The 70th Enfield Music Festival kicked off on a high note last Saturday when hundreds of budding musicians began competing in the choral, solo singing, instrumental, speech and drama classes. And the festival will continue this Saturday at the Aylward School, Windmill Road, and the Millfield House Arts Centre, Silver Street, Enfield, followed by a performance of the 18 prize winners selected from the 180 classes at the Aylward Theatre on May the 24th. The number of entries for the competition has more than doubled from 300 to 700 over the 5 years since local musicians Mr. Neil Hatton and his wife Janet took the competition over. The judges, all professional musicians, are very impressed with the overall standard this year, which is bound to be good for our local teachers, said Mrs. Hatton. For more details, contact Penny Wilkinson on 803 6213 or 5283.
Last week in our history quiz we asked if you knew the original names of Oakwood Station and Turkey Street Station. Oakwood Tube Station was originally called Enfield West. In the early 1930s the Piccadilly line was extended from Finsbury Park to Cockfosters, and Enfield West Station opened on the 13th of March 1933. Turkey Street Railway Station was originally called Forty Hill Station. This railway line was opened in 1891 and ran from Edmonton to Cheshunt, being known as the Southbury Loop. At first this line was very unsuccessful and Forty Hill Station had to be closed, but in the 1960s it was realised that the commuter belt had spread, and after electrification the station was opened again as Turkey Street Station. Now for this week's questions. The first one we feel is very easy. Who was the famous writer who has a cottage named after him in Edmonton and who also lived in Gentleman's Row and Chayside, North Enfield? Second question. How is a private car park belonging to the Southgate and District Reformed Synagogue connected with the birth in 1784 of a man who was also a writer, a poet, author and critic? The answers to this quiz and the history attached will be given to you next week.
3 Enfield youths accused of surrounding and threatening police officers were acquitted of the charges at Wood Green Crown Court last week. Graham Farquhar of Langhedge Lane, Edmonton, Winston Dennis of Pym's Gardens, South Edmonton, and Jason Edgehill of Holtzwhite's Hill, Enfield, all denied committing the offence of violent disorder. The prosecution alleged the teenagers were part of a group of 20 to 30 people who surrounded police in Church Street, Edmonton at 4 a.m. on March 27th last year, where police arrested a man. It was alleged that McFarquhar, holding a lump of wood, threatened to crack their skulls, and that Dennis was holding a piece of brick and said, "Come on, you are going to be killed." Edgehill was accused of pushing an officer during the incident near a petrol station forecourt. All three defendants accused the police of lying and said they played no part in any incident. After being acquitted of violent disorder, Edgehill admitted committing 6 burglaries involving property worth £10,000. He was sentenced to 6 months detention. Edgehill was traced from fingerprints found at the scene of the crimes.
A builder died last week when he was engulfed in a fire flash from an acetylene tank. Self-employed John O'Connell, aged 56, was working in an alleyway between 2 houses in Bidwell Gardens, Barnes Green, when the accident happened. He was using a blowtorch for soldering work when he accidentally cut through a pipe leading from the acetylene tank. Mr. O'Connell came from Lindsay Road, Hornsey. A post-mortem is yet to be held.
It's only a matter of time before somebody seriously injures themselves on the pavements of Green Dragon Lane, Winchmore Hill, according to residents, and no repairs will be done until late summer. The lane has been dangerous for a year and a half, according to the residents, while council estimates say it will be another 4 months at least before it's properly mended. British Telecom is now excavating the road only weeks after the council repaired damage done by the storm of October 1987. "It's really very dangerous," said resident Susie Clark. "It's in a dreadful state. What happens if someone breaks their leg?" British Telecom started its general upgrading work 6 weeks ago and will be another 3 to 5 weeks before they finish. The council will then wait 3 months for the land to settle before finally repairing the damage. According to a council spokesman, the original delay in repairing the damage done by the storm was caused by the huge amount of work resulting from that storm.
Last week you heard part of a talk by Sid Beadle, who has a pile of 200 bricks in his garden. That number had increased to 202, as Pat has quite willingly donated a couple of bricks from her garden, and she says it's in the interest of research. And now we have the last part of an interview with Mr. Beadle, and you remember he started talking about the London Brick Company and its origins in Enfield. He ended by talking about the flattened type bricks, and goes on to say,
LBC stands for London Brick Company, and that's the biggest brick-making firm in the whole of Britain now. I mean, this house was made of LBC bricks. This would be about 1950 or earlier, is it?
1962, yes, you're near enough, yes.
1960. This is made with what they call the flattened type bricks, which are made nowadays in Bedfordshire and up there by Peterborough, that area. Now, those bricks, they started making them in the 1880s, I think it was. And one of the people who started making those flattened bricks was a man called John Hill, and he was a Scotsman who'd come down from Scotland to make his fortune, and he was building houses in London. He started in Tottenham and Hornsey and that area, just as what they call a speculative builder. You know, he tried to make some money. He made a lot of money. And he was making so many houses, he thought, well, I might as well make my own bricks. And he went up to Peterborough, to a place called Fletton. Now that's what the brick's called, is the Fletton bricks. And he bought a brickyard, just like that. He bought a brickyard and started making these Fletton bricks, and he was so well organised that he virtually took over most of the brickmaking. And then he said to himself, well, I want some better quality bricks, some red ones, for the outside. See, these Flettons didn't look very nice. They were rather untidy in appearance. But he wanted some red bricks for making the outside of the buildings nice. So he came down to Enfield, and he found an area where he could make bricks. Now, I don't know whether your listeners know about the Bellings factory.
Yes, I think we've had actually listeners who worked there.
Ponders End. Well, where the Bellings factory is today, it's down in a hollow. And that hollow, if you're travelling on the bus, now, the people who are unsighted won't be able to see it, but if they walked across it, they'd see it. Southby Road is about 10 feet higher than the land on either side.
And what's happened is that Southbury Road is normal level, but in the past, brickmakers have dug out about 10 or 20 feet of clay on either side. And so it's like going along on a sort of raised up causeway. And now where Bellings is on one side is where this chap Hill made his LBC bricks in Enfield.
That's
fascinating, isn't it? And he thought of that name, London Brick Company. It's a marvellous name. Nobody can beat it, can they?
No.
And it's become the biggest brick company in the world.
And you told me that the little Aldersbrook Park, that's where they used to take the clay from at one time.
That's Harry Rogers again.
That's Harry Rogers, yeah.
Aldersbrook Park down by Baker Street. If you go to it, again, you have to go down into it. It's about 10 or 20 feet below the road level. You can feel yourself going down into it. And it's got a flat floor. That's exactly the right shape of the brick field. You see, the clay layer was only about 10 or 20 feet thick. And then you got down to gravel. So when they got down to the gravel, they stopped digging, you see. So you got that flat bottom. It's an interesting hobby, tracing all these bits.
Are you going to write a book about all this?
And I hope to produce a paper, they call it, a paper, the Edmonton 100 Historical Society. And it'll be about bricks and brickmaking.
Marvellous.
In Tottenham, Edmonton, Enfield, and the areas around. I mean, I spend ages. My wife thinks I'm a bit mad, but she's also a bit mad now. And yesterday I was out at Theobald's, which is in Cheshunt.
Yes.
I don't know if any of your listeners come from Cheshunt, do they?
Yes, some people.
Well, there's a place called Cedars Park there.
Oh, yes.
And Cedars Park has the remains of the old Theobald's house, not the one that's there now, the Theobald's cellar.
Really? Yeah.
Now, the old Theobald's, in its time, in Elizabeth's time, she visited it many times. It was a huge house. It was, for a while, it was the biggest house in Britain. And it was a palace sort of place, all built of bricks. So obviously I want to go and look at the bricks there. There isn't much of it left now, it's all been knocked down. But I've been finding a few of the bricks. They date back to 1500 or something, you see. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it an open park? Can anyone go?
Yes. It's in Theobald's Lane.
Oh.
It's sort of between Waltham Cross and Cheshunt. Yeah, it's very easy to get to. Yeah.
And if any of our listeners find they have bricks in their garden which they think you might be interested in,
I'd be very pleased to see them. I'd be very pleased to look at them and tell them what they're like as regards who made them and what texture they are and things like that.
So shall they phone you? Would you like to put your phone number on the telephone?
Yes, if they wish. It's 360-1123. And my name is Sid Beadle. But as I say, if they would like me to have a closer look at them, they can. If they live nearby, I'll come and see them and talk to them. Yes, give me their address. I travel around in this part of North London, yes, to see them all.
Well, thank you very much.
Very
fascinating
very
talk.
Nice, very nice.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Sid Beadle. We are repeating Mr. Beadle's telephone number in case you want to know about the bricks in your house and garden. It is 360-1123. 360-1123. And you may be interested to know that the building we are recording in, Lombard House, Baird Road, stands on the site of the former Crown Brick Company.
Now for another historical society. The Edmonton 100 Historical Society hold monthly meetings at different locations in the borough, and visitors are welcome at these meetings. But listeners should be warned that the lectures are usually accompanied by a slideshow. Their next meeting will be at the Co-op Hall, Hertford Road, on Tuesday the 25th of April 1989 at 7:45 at 8 p.m. The Co-op Hall is not far short of Carter Hatch Lane, next to Quick Fit Autos. There is a bus stop nearby, routes 121 and 279. At this meeting, David Pam will speak on Enfield's factories and unemployed in the 1920s. In the Society's newsletter, Mr. Pam says, those who remember the 1920s are getting fewer. Hundreds of demobilised men had returned home from the war. Thousands who had been employed in the vast armament factories in Enfield, Edmonton and Waltham Abbey found themselves discharged. Women who had attained independence by war work lost their jobs. The small arms factory ground to a halt. Ponders End Shell Works closed. The Royal Gunpowder Factory was threatened with closure. But while government factories forced it to a standstill, private firms, particularly in the electrical industry, expanded and new factories opened. This post-war boom, however, lasted only a year or so before a slump set in, and the situation was worsened by a series of strikes, both national and local. Even the police came out in Edmonton and Wood Green. The miners' strike of 1921 threatened to turn into a general stoppage. The upper class anticipated revolution. The middle classes flocked to the drill hall to enrol in the defence units. Men trained in the town park. There's widespread unemployment, both locally and nationally, and the unemployed occupied Enfield factories to prevent overtime being worked and demonstrated behind banners and bands. Industry began to expand again in 1924, and firms diversified and new ones were established. There was a great expansion, especially in the electrical industry. The use of domestic electricity spread throughout the district, and new factories were built in the Queensway and along Southbury Road. Then came the general strike of 1926, and volunteers in +4s enrolled to serve as train drivers, conductors, lorry drivers and special constables. Some private buses kept running for a time, and troops were stationed at the Royal Small Arms Factory. A few trams ran with a policeman fore and aft. Then at 10 o'clock on the 1st of May, BBC 2LO announced that the general strike was over. The return to work was rapid. There were few prosecutions locally.
Unemployment began to increase again in 1927, and some suffered great hardship and were forced to seek help from the poor law. But the depression was less enduring and less severe in Enfield than in places like South Wales. Enfield was an area of high technology. By 1929, new firms were opening up. Land had now become available for industry along the new Cambridge Arterial Road. The talk will be illustrated, and refreshments will be served in the interval. The Society's History and Conservation Day this year will be held at the Enfield Grammar School on Saturday, the 29th of April, from 11 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. David Pam will speak on Victorian Enfield, leisure and pleasure in a country town. This talk will start at 2 p.m. in the large hall, and it will be illustrated. This talk will be followed at 3 p.m. by one on Trent Park, given by Steve Dorey. Trent has been a park since the enclosure of the Chase in 1777, and its story from Dr. Jebb to Philip Sassoon is one of human achievement and human frailty. Steve Dorey is always worth listening to, and on this subject he is superb.
And now we send our congratulations to two of our listeners, Mr. and Mrs. Fulcher of Landseer Road, who will be celebrating their ruby wedding next week. As Mr. Harold Fulcher is not well enough to get out very much, friends and relatives will be coming to the house for a party, and we do hope they all have a lovely time. Unfortunately, we've been unable to get a copy of the hymn they requested to play on the news tape. We do have difficulty in answering requests like this anyway, as there are copyright problems. And being a news tape, we don't have a library of records. So, generally, we must ask listeners not to request music to be played, although in this case we did try to get the hymn, Great is Thy Faithfulness, but failed to do so. Anyway, we do hope Mr. and Mrs. Fulcher have a lovely day, and one which they will remember with great pleasure in the years to come.
Thanks, Anne. The New Millfield Theatre has an exciting programme of events in the next few months, and while we'll be giving you these in more detail in another news tape, we thought you might like to know about a few famous people who will be visiting the theatre in order that you can book ahead and get good seats. On May 21st at 8 p.m, Richard Baker and friends will be giving a programme of readings and recitations from English literature, which sounds as though it will be on the light-hearted side, and they will be accompanied by pianist Caroline Budd. Tickets are £5.25 with a concession price of £4.25 for pensioners, students and unemployed. In June there's a jazz festival. Courtney Pine visits theatre on Thursday the 15th of June at 8 p.m. The tickets are £6.50. Good Time George, our old friend George Melly, accompanied by, as always, John Chilton's Feet Warmers, will be there on Sunday the 18th of June at 8 p.m. Tickets there are £6.50, and it's the same price for Chris Barber and his band on Saturday the 24th of June at 8 p.m. If you're one of those people who don't go out much at night, the Barbara Thompson Band will be performing on Sunday, the 25th of June, from 12:30pm. The price is £2, and the bar will be open with light snacks and refreshments available. In fact, if you've paid your rates and the council's got enough money, there will be a free lunchtime jazz concert on Sundays 7th, 14th, 21st and 28th of May, starting at 12:30pm with a Brian Johnson trio and guests. On Wednesday the 26th of July and Thursday the 27th, those famous local lads, Chaz and Dave, will be entertaining at 8pm. Tickets are priced at £7 with a concession price at £6. The Millfield programme is available at libraries and art centres, and if you want to know some more details, you can telephone the box office on 807 6680.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm very much a jazz fan. I was rather pleased to hear that the jazz festival, which used to be at the Intimate Theatre, hasn't finished, and I shall be going along to Millfield to hear some of this music. But summer is coming. Well, yes, they keep telling us that. And the tennis fans are getting fit, especially the younger ones, because former Wimbledon mixed doubles champion Joe Jury will be at Queenswood School, Shepherd's Way, Brookman's Park on Saturday from 10 o'clock till 2:30 for a coaching session. More than 500 children under the age of 13 will take part in the Pilkington Grand Prix class clinics. Jury and coach Alan Jones will be aided by 20 other coaches. I always look forward to the clinic at Queenswood, says Jury. It's tremendous to see so many children having a good time. It's not too late for any of them to develop into world-class players, and hopefully the coaching they receive will help them on their way. The Hazelwood Club, to which Joe belongs, began its open fortnight on Tuesday night. The all-weather courts in Ridge Avenue will open on Saturday and Sunday, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and all are welcome. The fortnight ends on Sunday week. And in swimming, not in the open I shouldn't think, Enfield Swimming Club members M. Laban, breaststroke, H. Smith, backstroke, and L. Brock, butterfly and freestyle, won their events in the Kingston Gala on Saturday. And N. Bavita, D. Hall, J. Smith, J. Ellard, P. Ellard, D. Dell, D. Cully, N. Roberts, C. Piggott, H. Cooper, T. Jones, C. Ricketts, H. Smith, M. Leyburn, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all recorded personal best times.
And here's a piece from Lord Ted Graham's diary in the Gazette. He says, I'm enormously cheered to be told that the building of a holiday bungalow for the users of the Enfield Work Centre in Alma Road, Ponders End, will begin this month at Bordsey, Suffolk. I'm told that money is still needed, and it's hoped to raise the last £25,000 as the result of a sponsored walk-jog on May Day, starting at the White Horse Pub, Green Street, at 10 a.m. I'm also told that Tessa Sanderson, our Olympic gold medal javelin thrower, will be there to wave runners off on their journey of salvation.
Friends and colleagues rallied round former Enfield Football Club captain John Payne to raise £12,000 at the Starlight Rooms in Southbury Road, Enfield, last Friday. John, whose weight has dropped to 5 stone since he was stricken with motor neurone disease, was supported by more than 300 people at the fundraising dinner and dance held in his honour. Collector's items auctioned included Sebastian Coe's tracksuit and signed Manchester United shirts. Former Enfield player and property developer Danny Desmond made a donation of £5,000. This was a truly magnificent contribution from everyone involved, said Enfield Football Club director John Jefferson. John Payne joined Enfield Football Club in 1964, making nearly 500 appearances at Enfield. He played for the England Amateur International team, twice for the Great Britain Olympic team, and notched up numerous medals, including the European Cup Winners' Medal. He was club captain for 3 years, up to 1973.
Forty Hall now has a new roof after months of restoration work. Before the roof was quite finished, the site was visited by members of the Edmund Hundred Historical Society, and Sid Beadle wrote a report for the Secretary, David Pam. As Sid explained to Pat at a later date, the report was really for David's ears, but Mr. Pam printed the report in the Edmonton Hundred Society's newsletter including a story about the roof workers of 1896 in Colonel Bowles' time. This is what Sid wrote. Today we visited Faulty Hall. Work on replacing the roof slates was nearly complete. They appear to have done a good job, and the new Westmoreland slates look very attractive. We spoke to the men who were doing the lead work on the roofs and porches. They were a small specialist firm, ERD Plumbers, of father and two sons. Father Dillaway told us that they did many jobs on important buildings such as Eton College and the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. About 16 tons of lead had been used on the Faulty Hall job. It was £8 to the square foot, the best. They had discovered a label stating that the roof had previously been repaired by Mr. Oliver and his mate Mr. Washington in 1896. That was at the time the Bowles family took the house. This label was under the lead on one of the 4 posts which stick up out of the roof, the northeast one. The Dillaways had put their label under the northwest post lead. When asked whether they had found anything else, Mr. Dillaway was rather embarrassed. The roof workers of 1896 had recorded the results of a competition they had between themselves. Where did they record these results? On the roof timbers? What kind of contest? No details were given. That brings us to the end of this evening's tape, and it's good night from
John.
And?
Alec?
And me, Alf, with Pete on the controls. Say good night, Pete.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.